Hello everyone. Before we begin, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me, where are you listening from? And what time is it for you? Now, let me tell you a story. My name is Dr. Lena Kovar, and until 6 weeks ago, my life revolved around dusty manuscripts, lost dialects, and phonetic transcription. I'm a professor of comparative linguistics at Charles University in Prague, with a specialization in pre-Indo-European root systems and unclassified symbol sets. That's a long way of saying no one really cared what I did, not until the Czech government quietly pulled me from my winter sabbatical with no explanation, handed me a non-disclosure agreement thicker than any textbook I've ever written, and told me my expertise was urgently required at a secure underground site near the Bohemian karst caves. It started with a discovery by a private drilling company working southwest of the city. They were supposed to be laying geothermal lines, but at a depth of 180 meters, their equipment struck something artificial, an unmarked stone wall embedded deep in the limestone. A government survey team was called in. Within hours, operations were shut down and the site sealed off. 2 days later, I was escorted to a Cold War-era military facility that hadn't been used in decades. I still remember my escort's face, a middle-aged man in a plain black coat with no insignia. He never introduced himself, never explained who he worked for. He just handed me a folder as we descended in the service elevator. I opened it expecting to find documents. Instead, there were photos, high-resolution images of strange markings carved into a curved stone surface. My breath caught. They weren't from any known language group, not even close. Some of the symbols resembled sound-based glyphs, articulation maps I'd seen only in reconstructed proto-languages, but others defied all classification. A looping spiral at the center was repeated in multiple forms. One version looked etched with surgical precision. Another appeared melted into the stone itself, as if from intense localized heat. Beneath the images, someone had scrawled in red ink, "Reacts to sound." That was when I knew this was no ordinary job. The facility beneath the caves was an active construction site, disguised as a decommissioned research outpost. The deeper we went, the colder it became. Not just the usual underground chill, but something sharper. At the lowest level, they'd reinforced an old limestone chamber with steel beams and floodlights. At the far end of the room was the object from the photos, a massive stone arch, nearly 10 feet high, embedded in the wall like the entrance to an ancient temple. Its surface was covered in those same impossible symbols. They glistened faintly in the floodlights, as if absorbing and refracting the light in ways stone shouldn't. When I approached, my skin prickled. I instinctively touched my throat. Something about the air felt wrong, thinner, vibrating. My handler, still silent, handed me a tablet. On it was a waveform audio file. I tapped play. The sound was short, a low-pitched harmonic tone that faded in and out. It resembled a didgeridoo, but deeper, almost subsonic. As it played, I watched the stone. At first, nothing happened. Then I noticed a spiral symbol near the arch's apex. It shimmered. No, it pulsed. Very faintly, the stone responded to the tone. That's when the whispering began. It came from everywhere, not loud, not distinct, but layered like a dozen voices trying to speak at once in a language I couldn't understand. I turned to my handler. You recorded that? He shook his head. Wasn't there before. That was my first day. Over the next week, I worked with a small research team in total isolation. We weren't told where the funding came from, only that we were studying a cultural anomaly of unknown origin. I had no idea how far this operation extended globally. All I knew was the whispers intensified every time we played certain frequencies. It wasn't just pitch, it was rhythm, breath, cadence. The voice mattered. I began running phonetic patterns through the arch, reciting linguistic nonsense, experimenting with tone and tempo. At times, the stone would ripple subtly, like sound was interacting with something behind it. I recorded everything. Day 4, I spoke the reconstructed form of a neuralic root for threshold. The whispering cut off immediately. Then a word came back, one I didn't recognize, 4 syllables. I played the recording over and over again, trying to isolate the phonemes. I don't know why I spoke it aloud, but I did, and something knocked, not a sound from the air, from the stone itself, 3 dull knocks, slow and deliberate, not an echo, not random, a response. I backed away, adrenaline spiking. One of the junior researchers, Pavel, went pale and bolted for the exit corridor. He never came back to the project. We were told he had respiratory issues and returned to his family in Ostrava. I knew better. Pavel had heard something in those knocks that scared him on a level he couldn't explain. I felt it, too, not fear of a monster, but the fear of being acknowledged by something watching through a keyhole, something intelligent. That night, my dreams changed. I found myself standing before the arch, but the room was dark. No floodlights, no team. Just me and the symbols, glowing faintly. I spoke the word again, the one I had heard in the whispers. The arch split open like a sphincter of stone, spiraling wide into a corridor of impossible geometry, all angles that bent toward me and stretched backward at the same time. The cold air rushed out in a wave, but with it came a voice. It spoke through me, not in words I understood, but in memory. I felt my childhood home, the sound of my father coughing in the next room, my mother's voice, but it twisted, the intonation wrong, the syntax reversed. We know you. You are of the throat. You are of the opening. I woke gasping, drenched in sweat. The temperature in my quarters was -3 degrees Celsius. My breath fogged in front of me. The heater was on. 3 days later, I returned to the site with a recording I had constructed, a carefully sequenced pattern of phonemes mimicking the spiral glyph's resonance frequency. When I played it, the arch vibrated. I don't mean a subtle tremble. The steel beams around the chamber groaned. Dust fell from the ceiling. Then a fracture appeared down the middle of the arch. Not a crack, a gap. A vertical seam opened like a sealed tomb, splitting from pressure inside. From within came a humming sound, like distant choirs submerged in static. The cold spiked instantly. Our instruments dropped below -20 degrees Celsius. Frost formed on the observation window. My tablet shorted out. And in the center of the fracture, an eye opened. It wasn't organic, it didn't blink, but I felt it see me. Everyone else fled. I stayed. Not by courage I was held, like gravity turned inward. The spiral glowed. I felt a pressure in my throat, like the urge to speak, but no breath. The voice came again. not your door, not your mouth. Then the fracture closed, stone sealing like skin. The temperature rose, and the whispers stopped. The project was shut down 48 hours later. All documentation confiscated. My team scattered. My handler vanished. I was given a plane ticket, a burner phone, and an NDA renewed with legal threats I still wake up sweating from. They thought it was over. They were wrong, because now, wherever I go, I hear it, the tone, the spiral, in fans, in pipes, in my own breath. A few nights ago, I whispered that 4-syllable word into the darkness again, just to see, and the heater knocked 3 times, just like before. There are doors under this world, not built, but grown, not to enter, but to listen, and now they know I speak the language. God help me. I think they're learning how to speak it back. It started with the birds. 3 days after I returned to Prague, I noticed them. Not the way people notice birds in spring when the city starts to thaw and the trees wake up, no. I mean they stopped singing. On the Charles University campus, the trees are full of life even in winter, pigeons, sparrows, the odd blackbird. But on the morning of March 12th, as I crossed the quad, I realized something had gone wrong. The air was silent. Not dead silent, but stretched like a room waiting for something to speak. And I felt it in my ears, not my chest, like pressure before a storm. I tried to write it off, jet lag, cold air, post-traumatic stress. I hadn't told anyone what happened in the Bohemian Karst caves. Not really. They classified the entire operation 2 days after I was discharged. And I'd signed enough non-disclosure paperwork to bury me for life. But the birds, the silence, the vibrations, something was still listening. My flat on Zlata Street became a fortress. I blocked every vent, covered every mirror. I refused to speak in the shower, the bedroom, or the kitchen, just in case. I wore earplugs at night. But the sounds got smarter. The night of March 16th, I was reviewing old phonetic recordings from a field study in southern Finland. Nothing unusual, just vowel shifts in an endangered semi-dialect, when the waveform on my laptop spiked. I thought it was interference. But when I isolated the spike and slowed the audio, it formed a syllable. Li, na. I didn't say anything. None of the speakers had. The voice came from under the waveform, beneath the human register. It had learned my name. That night I dreamed of the fracture again, of the spiral splitting the stone. Only this time, the eye didn't just open. It blinked. I did what any academic does under pressure. I went to the archive. Charles University's Phonetic Archive is a vault beneath the language faculty. 200 years of recordings, notes, and samples locked in temperature-controlled cases. No one uses it at night, which made it perfect. I brought my laptop, sound equipment, and every recording I had from the cave. My plan was simple. Find patterns. If the door responded to sound, it meant resonance mattered. There had to be a harmonic sequence, a key to unlock it safely. But by midnight, I had nothing. Just the spiral symbol, sketched 100 ways on a dozen pages, and that same 4-syllable word that had split the door open. Esunari thou. The moment I whispered it aloud, quietly, cautiously, surrounded by stone, the room changed. The walls pressed inward. The temperature dropped. My breath fogged in front of me. I turned toward the stairwell and saw a shadow at the glass. It wasn't human. The glass door to the archive is reinforced, thick, curved, with a metal handle shaped like a tuning fork. On the other side stood a shape, not a person, a vertical smear, like heat rising off asphalt, but dense. It didn't move like flesh. It pulsed, syncing with my breathing, until I stopped breathing altogether. The lights in the hallway behind it flickered. My ears popped. And then it knocked 3 slow knocks, just like in the cave. The same rhythm, the same cold. I reached for the recording mic without thinking, pressed record. The waveform stayed flat. No knock, no breath, no ambient sound. Then the wave rose, a new word, not from outside the door, from inside the archive. I turned too fast. My vision spun. The lights dimmed. Behind the last row of shelves, something whispered, "We are of the opening. Let us learn your shape." I don't remember how I got home. The security footage from the university archives was wiped. My laptop recorded nothing but a single line of symbols, rendered by software that shouldn't be able to process phonetics into glyphs, but I recognized them. The same spiral patterns I saw carved into the first door. They now formed a ring, a portal. I've received 3 emails since, each from addresses that don't exist. Each one says the same thing. We are at the threshold. The stone speaks through mouths that forget they are doors. My mouth is dry, constantly, like I'm forgetting how to swallow. My own voice has started to echo in strange ways. Sometimes it finishes my thoughts before I do. Tonight I'm going back. There's a sealed vault in the catacombs beneath the archive, closed since the 1800s. I checked the old schematics. No one has a key, but the wall on the north side hums when I stand close and say that word again, Esunarithal. I think they want me to open it. I think it's another door, and I think this one doesn't need to be traced. It just needs to be sung. I've spent most of my adult life tracking water, river behavior, permafrost shifts, aquifer depletion. It's the kind of work that either bores people stiff or terrifies them once they realize what it implies. I was posted to Eagle Plains 2 months ago. Population 8 on a good week, 0 on a bad one. Northwest of Dawson City, just below the Arctic Circle. My job was to study the thaw line, because it's rising. That's not a theory, that's not politics, that's field data. The ice is thinning faster than our worst projections, and something's changing underneath it. The ground isn't just warming, it's shifting, like something's moving inside it. At first, I thought it was glacial melt destabilizing the sublayers. I was wrong. The thing about the Yukon in late February is that everything lies to you. Your compass twitches even when the wind's still. The sun barely rises, then vanishes sideways. The air feels thin despite the altitude, like the cold once you quiet. The first anomaly showed up during a bore test. I drilled to 6 meters expecting dense permafrost or compacted ice, same as every core I'd taken before, but at 5.8 meters the drill bit hit nothing, a hollow space, perfectly circular, smooth-walled, as if something had melted a sphere into the ice from the inside out. I lowered a thermal probe. The temperature inside was minus 37 degrees Celsius, same as ambient, but the probe's acoustic sensor picked up a faint vibration. Not a hum, not a whir, a tone, pulsing every 9 seconds. Subsonic, human ears wouldn't catch it, but I could feel it in my teeth. I flagged the data. Took a core sample anyway. The ice came up clean. Too clean. No sediment. No trapped oxygen. No layered crystal patterns like you'd expect in ancient frost. This wasn't ice formed by nature. It was refrozen, as if something had pushed outward and the permafrost sealed around it. That was day 1. Day 2, I heard the knocking. I was analyzing the sample under low light magnification in the camp lab when something struck the cargo container wall. 3 knocks. Spaced apart. Deliberate. Not wind. Not snow. I froze. I waited, heart thudding. Then it came again. Same pattern. Dull, muffled, from below the floor. The container sat on solid ice. There was nothing beneath it but frozen ground, unless something had moved. I strapped on my boots and went outside with a flashlight and a 357 I kept hidden in my tool bag. Not standard issue, but out here, standard doesn't mean much. There were no tracks, no signs of wildlife, just wind-carved snowdrifts and the moan of cold air through the tree line. But when I stood over the borehole, I felt it again. The tone, stronger now, and layered. I called it in to Parks Canada the next morning, asked if any seismic sensors had picked up microquakes or underground movement. They hadn't. The regional office told me the cold might be playing tricks on my instruments. That night I woke to my own voice playing back from the field recorder. I hadn't touched it. I hadn't even spoken into it. But there it was, my voice isolated, clipped, replaying a single word I hadn't said aloud in years. Open. By day 4, I stopped pretending this was a geological anomaly. The ice core started melting on its own inside a sealed negative temp unit. When I checked the time-lapse footage, I watched frost pull away from the central spiral etched into the surface. Not carved, grown, like a branching root system, but geometric, curved, too precise. I scrubbed through the footage frame by frame. At 3 hours, 17 minutes, and 22 seconds, the lens fogged for exactly 6 seconds. When it cleared, the spiral had shifted, not melted, moved. I replayed the footage until my battery ran dry. On day 5, I drilled again. I don't know why. Curiosity, maybe. Stubbornness. Whatever was under that ice had to be catalogued. The new shaft was angled, deeper. I lowered a camera. At 14 meters, the walls changed, from pale blue to dark gray. Ice gave way to something else. Not stone, not metal. The camera couldn't focus properly. Every surface rippled like liquid, but held its shape. Then the signal cut out. Seconds before it died, the screen showed a circle in the floor. Not a pool, not an object. A mouth. I don't mean jaws or teeth. I mean a structure shaped like an orifice. An opening rimmed by symbols that pulsed faintly under the flashlight. Like the glyphs were breathing. The spiral pattern sat at the center. And from that spiral came a voice, low, rhythmic, impossible. Not from the speaker, from inside my head. We remember the warmth of the mouth. You are of the water, you are of the thaw. Speak the word. I blacked out. When I came to, it was nearly dark. The sky had turned purple, and my boots were full of melted snow. The borehole was gone. I don't mean filled, I mean vanished, covered by solid, untouched ice. And on my recorder, which hadn't been powered on, a new voice looped, soft, feminine. We are melting into you. I haven't left. I don't know how. Every time I pack, something breaks. The generator dies. The snowmobile won't start. My satellite phone just bleeds static. But the whispers are louder now, clearer. I hear them in the ice, in the pipes, in the shape of my breath. I know they're waiting for spring, waiting for the thaw. Because when the river floods, when the snow gives way, when enough doors open, they will come through, and it will sound like a voice you trust whispering your name back to you, through water, through bone, through the last crack in the ice. We were never supposed to dig that deep. Göbekli Tepe is the oldest known temple complex in the world. 11,000 years buried under the Anatolian plateau, far older than Stonehenge or the pyramids. But most of it is still hidden, layers we haven't touched. At least that's what the Turkish Ministry of Culture believed until 2 weeks ago, when a research team opened a shaft beneath Enclosure D. They called it anomalous voiding, a natural chamber sealed in soft limestone, untouched since the pre-pottery Neolithic. On day 3 of the excavation, they stopped reporting in. That's when they called me. My name is Farah Elamin. I work with UNESCO's Emergency Heritage Response Unit, a bureaucratic way of saying I get flown to old ruins when someone screws up badly enough to risk the site or themselves. The moment I stepped onto the plateau, I knew something was wrong. The site was silent. No wind, no generator hum, no footsteps crunching the gravel paths between enclosures, just blistering heat and the strange smell of iron dust in the air. I found the lead archaeologist's tent unzipped and empty, coffee still hot on the burner, a notebook open to a page that just read. It's not a temple, it's a mouth, and it remembers how to open. I descended into the shaft with a helmet cam, a radio, and an armed cultural guard named Tamer. The opening was narrow, claustrophobic, like crawling through a throat. The limestone had been smoothed, unnaturally clean, like it had been worn from the inside. After 20 meters, we reached the chamber. That's where we found them, 8 members of the excavation team. Not dead, not injured, just standing motionless in a perfect circle around the far wall. They were barefoot, their eyes open but unblinking. No one responded when we called their names. Tamer whispered something in Arabic under his breath. Jinn. I'm not religious, but in that moment I understood the instinct. Then the lights dimmed. The far wall was covered in dust at first, but when Tamer approached, his shoulder brushed it, and the powder sloughed away like dry skin. What lay beneath wasn't rock. It was metal, not copper, not gold, something darker, dull gray with faint glyphs etched into its surface, symbols arranged in tight loops and arcs. My pulse spiked. I recognized the pattern, spiral-based, radiating, a kind of logic that defied language. One of the researchers, a woman named Daria, stepped forward. She whispered a word I didn't understand. The glyphs on the metal glowed just for a second. Then we heard the breath. Not wind, not air displacement, a breath from the other side. The ground shook. The metal flexed like fabric under strain. Then it clicked, 3 soft knocks. The same rhythm I'd seen in a report from the Czech Republic. The same knocking mentioned in the banned transcript from the Colorado mine. I knew then this wasn't an isolated event. It was one of the doors. Tamer pulled me back. Smart. We ran the ascent line. I turned once just before crawling back into the shaft and saw Daria still facing the metal wall. She turned to look at me and smiled, but her lips didn't move. Only her eyes did. The expression didn't belong on her face. It wasn't hers. I scrambled up. Back at base, the camp was in chaos. Radios failing. GPS going haywire. The site map had shifted. Tents not where they were an hour ago. A thin layer of dust covered everything, but no wind had passed. Even the sun felt wrong. Too low for the hour. Shadows too long. I pulled the footage. My helmet cam had recorded everything, except the glyphs. That portion of the wall was a blur. Corrupted pixels where the spiral should be, just like the other door reports, just like Lena Kovar's sealed vault in Prague. That night I dreamt I was underground again, but this time I wasn't standing in the chamber. I was on the other side of the wall. The glyphs glowed faintly behind me, casting sickly shadows on the cavern walls. I wasn't alone. Something stood in the dark, watching, breathing in tandem with me. Then I heard my voice, speaking words I didn't know, words shaped like vowels, but longer. Soon, not spoken, and behind the voice another knock 3 times. Then silence. When I woke, I was outside my tent, standing, barefoot, feet pointed toward the shaft. I never sleepwalk. Until now. I submitted my report the next day, requested emergency quarantine of the site, requested UNESCO reroute all digs in the region. I used the phrase non-cultural anomaly, the strongest language I could legally use. It was denied. A new team is being flown in tomorrow. Their instructions are to finish opening the wall. I've forwarded everything, the corrupted footage, the transcripts, the spiral glyph sketches, to a private list of international contacts. People like Dr. Griffin Hayes, Lena Kovar, and a Canadian field tech named Rourke, who wrote me back immediately. We've seen the spiral. Don't let them open it. It's a door, but not for us. I'm not going back to Istanbul. I'm staying here, because the chamber hasn't been sealed. Because the glyphs are growing, visible now even in the soil outside the shaft. Because I just stood still for 15 minutes without realizing it, breathing in sync with something that's still knocking beneath the dust. And last night I whispered a word in my sleep. My voice recorder captured it. Su Nari Thou. We weren't looking for structures. We were digging for bones. Specifically at Charker Odontor, one of the last big predators before the extinction. My team had been working the New Queen Basin for 7 months, and until last week we were making textbook progress. Then we found the slab. The rock was too smooth. It didn't belong to any known layer in the stratigraphy. It was buried beneath 80 million years of sandstone, and yet it looked new. More unsettling, the surface hummed when you touched it. At first, we thought it was seismic vibration, but there were no quakes, no tectonic movement, just a low-frequency resonance that made your bones feel hollow. I radioed the university in Mendoza and sent samples for testing. While we waited, I ran a microscanner over the slab. The readings made no sense. No fractures, no mineral inclusions, no cellular structure at all. It wasn't stone, not fossil, not metal. Nothing identifiable. Then Camilla, our sedimentologist, found the symbol. It was shallow, almost imperceptible, a spiral etched into the center of the slab, perfectly geometric. At first it looked like erosion, but the lines were too clean, too intentional. She traced it with her fingertip. The hum grew louder, and that night she walked 3 kilometers into the desert barefoot. We found her at dawn, kneeling in a dry riverbed, her hands caked with soil, whispering something under her breath. The same 3 words over and over. We are returning. I tried to fly her out the next morning, but the dust storm hit. Satellite phone died. Solar charger wouldn't work. Our GPS trackers started showing duplicate pings, 2 signals for the same person in different locations. Camilla didn't sleep after that. She said the slab was singing now, calling others. And she wasn't wrong. That evening, one of our assistants started digging beside it, even though I'd ordered the area roped off. He said he heard something moving underneath, like animals breathing. I took his shovel away. He tried to bite me. By day 5, the slab's hum had become audible to everyone. No equipment needed. A low rhythmic drone pulsing every 8 seconds. It made our teeth ache, and then it opened. Not with a crack or a pop, just parted, like a seam splitting in leather. The center spiral twisted once, then slowly receded. Beneath it wasn't stone or dirt. It was black, not darkness, not absence of light, something impossibly deep. Camilla leaned in close. I tried to stop her, but she whispered a phrase I'd never taught her. Not Spanish, not Latin. Ena's own Nari, thou. And the darkness moved. We fled the site, left behind all our equipment. The slab, our samples, everything. 2 days later, the university called to say the courier we'd sent with the fossil fragment never arrived. No GPS record. No vehicle trace. It's like he'd vanished from the highway. 3 weeks have passed. I'm back in Mendoza now. But something's wrong. The humming followed me. It's faint, but constant, like a pressure in the skull. Sometimes I hear whispers at night. Sometimes I wake up with dust on my fingers. I reviewed the photos we took before the slab opened. The spiral symbol appeared twice. Once on the slab, once beneath it, carved into the fossilized skull of the Charqueodonto, as if it had been there long before the dinosaur died. I've been in contact with others now, a network. Researchers from Prague, Chile, India, even the Yukon, they've seen it too. The spiral, the hum, the knocking. They call them doors. I think they're right, but I don't think we're opening them. I think they're digging up through us. Because last night I ran a frequency match on the hum, the one recorded from the slab. It matches an echo pattern recorded in Turkey 6 months ago, and again in Colorado 4 months before that. Same resonance, same spiral, same word etched into the data log. Coming through. When the train hit the signal fault just past KM post 1116, I figured it was another freeze. Winter in Khabarovsk makes iron brittle and sensors go blind. Every few years a buried cable cracks under the weight of the permafrost, or relay shorts from condensation. We patch it, we curse, we thaw the line with diesel torches and keep the trains moving. That's the job. What I didn't expect, what none of us expected, was that the fault came from a track that wasn't on the system. A dead-end spur, one that shouldn't exist. It ran half a kilometer south of the main line. Bent iron, cracked timber, rusted to hell and coated in centuries of frost heave. We didn't build it. It wasn't in any map from Soviet rail archives, not even in the old imperial records. And yet, there it was. I've been in rail operations for 27 years. Spent half my life walking lines, reading signal voltage, yelling at new techs who don't know a frozen weld from a broken one. So when I saw that spur, when I followed it on foot, down a slope into the trees, past birch and stiff in the snow, I knew something was wrong. The steel didn't match standard gauge. The ties weren't creosote, they were carved with symbols, spirals. We traced a line to a collapsed platform, ancient wood and concrete, overtaken by frost and moss. There was a rusted sign just visible beneath the snowdrift, almost unreadable until I cleared it with my glove. It didn't say a station name. It said, "Do not follow the track," in 3 languages, Old Russian, Mandarin, something else I didn't recognize. The snow started falling harder then, thicker, and the air had that pressure you feel when a freight is coming. Low, distant, heavy, but the tracks were empty. There was no train, just that hum, that vibration rising up through my boots like something breathing under the frost. I called it in. My supervisor told me to clear the line and return to the main track. I didn't listen, because as I stood there in the trees, the snow melting just slightly around my boots in a perfect circle, I saw something further down the spur. A door, metal, set into the slope like a bunker, covered in frost and lichen, carved with that same spiral pattern we'd seen on the ties. But it wasn't just a door, it was sealed, heavy iron clasps, stone around the edges, sunk into the hill like it had always been there. And on the center, 3 indents, knuckles, like something had knocked hard from the inside. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning I hiked back alone. Before sunrise, the door was still there, but the snow around it was different, flattened, melted, as if something had walked out, then walked back in. I took photos with my work phone, none of them saved, all of them corrupted, just static and gray spirals. I started hearing frequencies in the main relay shed 2 days later. Low pulse tones, repeating patterns. At first I thought it was feedback from the switchyard antennas, but the pulses didn't match any transmission band. I plotted them on paper. They drew a shape, not a wave, a spiral. I sent the data to a systems engineer in Vladivostok I'd worked with before. He called me back the next morning. "I don't know what this is," he said, "but your signal, It's not coming from any active track relay. I asked where it was coming from. He was quiet for a long time, then said, "You're not going to believe this. It's coming from under the track." The next day they shut down the spur. A military team arrived by air, unmarked chopper. Quiet, fast, no emblems. I was told not to return. They gave me leave, paid, extended. But I couldn't stop dreaming about the door, the knocks, the pressure. 3 weeks later, the snow melted enough for a landslide to hit the main line north of us, buried 6 cars. No fatalities. But during the excavation, a secondary team uncovered a concrete support tunnel beneath the hillside, one that wasn't on any construction record. They sent in a camera drone. The video feed cut out after 8 minutes. The last frame before the blackout showed a second door embedded in the far wall. Same dimensions, same shape, same spiral symbol. The report was sealed that night. The site was quarantined. Since then, I've been tracking other signal techs, other workers along the rail spine, people who've heard the knocks, felt the hum, who've seen the snow melt in circles even at -30. There are more. A signal controller in Omsk who quit after hearing footsteps in the ice. A welder in Irkutsk who blacked out during a maintenance call and woke up 6 kilometers down line. An engineer in Yekaterinburg who claims she saw a train with no number pass through her yard at 3:13 a.m. and the camera footage shows nothing, just snow. And that hum, always the hum. They think these doors are isolated. They're not. They follow the track like veins, like roots. And I think the trains don't run on schedules anymore. I think they run on summons. You hear it in the steel. You feel it in the frost. Something is waking, and it's using the old paths to move. Yesterday, I walked the spur one last time. The frost had cracked in a perfect semicircle. The door wasn't closed anymore. It wasn't open either. It was ajar. Like someone had left it open just a crack, just enough to whisper. And through that crack I heard something echo, bouncing between the trees, off the rails, into my chest like a ghost through steel. Another train is coming. I came to Illilisset to study decay, glacial retreat, ice shelf collapse, climate acceleration. My postdoc work focused on the Jakobshavd Glacier, one of the fastest retreating bodies of ice on Earth. It bleeds meltwater into the fjord like a vein that won't close. It's also loud, pat. People don't realize that ice isn't silent. It groans, pops, shifts, carries vibrations miles beneath your feet. You learned to interpret the rhythm, to feel its movement in your chest. That's how I knew something was wrong before the equipment did. The glacier was still shifting, but now it was speaking. At first I assumed equipment failure. The anomaly came through our sub-ice hydrophone array on March 12th. A low-frequency pulse, long, slow repeating. But the rhythm wasn't random. 5 seconds on, 15 seconds off, over and over, like a heartbeat through stone. I ran spectral analysis. The waveform came back artificial, not seismic, not glacial, not marine. It was too precise, too clean. I logged it. I sent a report to Nuke. No reply. I replayed the signal in the lab that night, headphones on, scribbling a transcript of pulse lengths and decay. I didn't realize I was crying until the paper got wet. I wasn't sad. I wasn't afraid. But the sound, it made me remember things I never lived. Waking under frozen stone, breathing water, watching the spiral turn. On March 14th, the echo stopped. In its place, a voice. Not in any language I knew. A tone, rhythmic and melodic, but wrong. Every syllable bent upward, like it was curving away from the world. I isolated a 5-second clip and ran it through linguistic comparison tools. Phonetic structures didn't match any known root language, but the tonal structure had symmetry, which means it was constructed, which means it had a source. I went outside. It was minus 29 degrees Celsius. Still dark. The horizon glowed silver over the fjord, and beneath the ice, deep beneath, I heard it again, not through headphones, not through equipment. In my bones, a spiral song, low and cold and patient. On March 16th, a rift opened near borehole G. It wasn't seismic. There was no quake, no wind, just a vertical crack, clean, straight, 10 meters long, like a door cut through pressure-layered ice. I peered down into it expecting rock. Instead, I saw stone. Not natural, smooth, patterned, etched with arcs and rings and spirals. The same spirals I'd seen in a research log from a mining collapse in Colorado. The same spirals I'd heard described by a glaciologist in Norway who'd gone missing in 2021 after reporting voices under a melting ice cave. And the longer I stared at the spirals, the more I felt drawn. That night I slept in 30-minute bursts. When I finally dreamt, it wasn't a dream. It was a perspective, looking up through water, through ice, through black sky that bent around my vision like a globe in reverse. Something turned slowly overhead like a lid, a massive slab of stone, covered in glyphs, rotating silently in a void above me. Lightless, soundless. Not a place, a space. And I was underneath it, crawling toward the spiral. March 17th, I lowered a camera drone into the rift. It recorded for 2 minutes before losing signal. The last frame it sent back showed a tunnel, carved, not formed, geometric, descending into the ice in a spiral slope. Carved into the wall, a glyph I hadn't seen before. Not a spiral, an eye, horizontal, watching. I transmitted everything I had, footage, logs, sonar readings, to a private satellite uplink connected to a network of researchers I'd only heard whispers about. People who'd seen these things in other places. Remote places, buried places one name answered within an hour. Griffin Hayes. His message was brief. If you found the eye, it's already listening. I planned to evacuate, but the next morning the station had no power, no fuel, solar dead, batteries drained. All 3 emergency radios showed static. Outside, the glacier was silent. No pops, no creaks, no movement, only the hum, faint but constant, rising from the rift in the ice, making the snow around it vibrate, like a pressure building, like a sound waiting for a mouth. On March 18th, at 3:13 a.m., the spiral opened. I don't know how else to say it. The tunnel changed, became warmer, melted outward. and then something spoke from within. It wasn't a language, it was recognition, the tone you use when calling someone home, and it said my name, clear as a bell. But wrong, like it had never needed to form it before. Ellen. Just once, then silence. I don't remember recording the final message, but I found it this morning on the station's backup recorder. My voice, breathy, distant, singing a lullaby my grandmother used to hum in Faroese, but she never taught me the words. The rift has widened, the glyphs are visible now on the ice above it, burned into the surface in a slow, spiraling frost. I know what it wants. It wants me awake, it wants me to listen, and tonight I will go down. I have to know what's beneath, not just here, everywhere, because the ice is melting too fast, and something buried is melting with it, not dead, not asleep, just waiting, and the spiral is turning again. I was 19 when I first got assigned to Site Echo 9. Back then, they didn't call it anything classified, just the array, a stretch of reinforced antenna towers in the middle of the Mojave. Half the base was underground, half above, no insignia, no traffic in or out unless it was schedule locked. It was all hush-hush, Cold War leftover stuff. My job? Maintain the signal lines? They never told us what it broadcasted or received. Hell, we didn't even know if it was operational. Most of the time, the panels just hummed. Low-frequency noise. Dead signal. But sometimes, late at night, usually, the lights on the main relay would flicker, and the room would get cold. Not desert cold, bone cold. They shut Echo 9 down in 1997, buried the access roads, removed funding, told us it was obsolete. I never went back until the call came last month. The request came from a subcontractor I'd never heard of, Rovente Systems, asking if I could consult on a facility reactivation in San Bernardino County. No other details. Just coordinates and pay that made my eyebrows go up. When I checked the map, my gut sank. The coordinates pointed to the base of an old ridge 10 miles east of where Echo 9 used to be, which made no sense, because the only thing out there is scrub, salt flats, and rock. But I went because I needed the money, and because some part of me, the part I'd buried for 25 years, wanted to know what really happened beneath that base. The structure wasn't marked on any satellite map. They'd built it recently. Steel framing, temporary shelters, floodlights. The desert hummed with generators, and at the center of it all was the shaft, reinforced concrete ring, 10 meters wide, descending straight into darkness. A sticker on the guardrail said, "Property of Department of Energy, Anomalous Subsurface Study, ECHOX. One of the engineers, young, nervous, handed me a data tablet. Signal readings began 4 weeks ago, from 1,300 feet below. Not terrestrial. You'll understand when you hear it. I heard it at 3:13 a.m. They played me the recording. It started like static, then a pulse, long, slow, deep thrum. Thrum, thrum. Exactly the same rhythm I used to hear from the relay room in the 90s. I didn't even realize I'd grip the desk until my knuckles ached. But it wasn't just the hum that shook me. It was what came after, a voice, not human, not words, tones, winding upward in an impossible key, and between those tones, just barely audible, a phrase, English, garbled, "We are beneath your world," listening still. I descended with the team on day 2. The shaft dropped straight for over 1,300 feet, reinforced with old Soviet steel, they said, left over from a joint listening project in the 60s, a tunnel that never made the records. Halfway down, we passed a wall where the concrete was cracked in a perfect circle. No explosives, no pressure seam, just opened, like something inside had needed out. At the bottom was a corridor, pre-stressed concrete, steel supports, the kind they used for early radar arrays and command bunkers, but none of it matched the schematics. The hallway turned gently as it went deeper, not built on angles, curved like a corkscrew. And the deeper we went, the colder it got. When my flashlight caught the far wall, my knees almost gave. There it was, the door, 8 feet tall, metal like obsidian, not smooth, not rough, etched with concentric spirals, every line razor precise. At the center, a shape I'd seen once before, back in 1996, in a grainy printout from a broken camera near relay panel 3B. The eye. One of the researchers stepped too close. She didn't touch it, just leaned in. That's when the symbols glowed. Soft, blue-green light, almost like algae bloom on black water. And we heard it, a knock, once, twice, pause, ... 3 times. They pulled us out of the shaft that night. Rovente shut the site, told the press it was a geothermal anomaly. But I knew better. I'd heard that knock before. 28 years ago, during my second week on base, I stayed late for a systems test. Around midnight, the main antenna began turning slowly toward the southeast. That was impossible. It was deactivated. And from the relay box, I heard it, soft at first, then clear ... knock, knock. It came through the steel. I filed a report. They told me to keep quiet. The next morning, that relay room was welded shut. It's all connected. The knocks, the spirals, the doors. They've found them all over now. Russia, Chile, India, Greenland. They hum, they knock, they whisper, and they're opening again. Not from outside, from beneath. Yesterday, a researcher from Greenland sent me an audio file. Hydrophone data from beneath a collapsing glacier. I ran it through the same filters we used back in the day. Same pulses. Same frequency. Same 3 knocks. And buried beneath it, so faint I almost missed it, was the last thing I wanted to hear. A voice, a whisper, using my name. Wyatt, you were there when it began. So now I sit here in the dark typing this final report. The Mojave Array isn't just a dead project. It's a receiver, and something is transmitting again.